Welcome, everyone. I hope you've had a great summer. I hope the drought hasn't hit you too heavily in your raising of your garden. I know my one thing is my garden is now starting to produce tomatoes. Finally, my corn is gone already, so that's been harvested. Came on really a lot quicker than I anticipated, but that's how it is. Let's get started with the meeting and uh, let's let's do a roll call as we begin to make sure that we have everyone here and we have a quorum. Kelly, would you please call the roll?
Yep. And so just so you know, as of looking like we don't have a quorum, but I'll go through and do the roll call. We'll see where we're at. I'll also call attendance for non-voting members as well. So to start with voting members, I have Allison Einerson.
I'm here.
Perfect. Bjorn Carlson. Derek Hall.
I'm here.
Senator Davis.
Here.
Gina Cornea. Okay. Jack Wilbur.
Here.
Janae Duncan. Okay. Jordan Riley. Kelsey Hall. And Commissioner Butters.
I'm here.
Claire Collard. And Tamara Jorgensen.
Here.
Okay, so that puts us with we're just one shy, but I know we are expecting Kelsey and Bjorn. So Senator Davis, do you want to wait until a little bit later? I can keep an eye on the attendance and let you know when we've got a quorum.
Yes, if you would do that, please. Thank you.
Okay, and then non-voting members, really quickly, I have Ashley Patterson, Colleen Dick,
I'm here.
Reagan Emmons, perfect, and Ruby Ward,
I'm here.
and Cimbria Patterson. All right.
Here.
Perfect. Okay, we should be good to go now, Senator Davis.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. And I know, I believe Commissioner Butters wanted to bring us an update here. And so, Commissioner Butters, if you're on board, and please, if you would, bring us up to date. What's going on?
Okay. Well, I will do that. Here at the department, of course, we've got a lot of work that we're doing right now with our strategic plan moving forward, and also working with drought relief assistance. We're working with the governor's office and legislative leadership to hopefully come up with some assistance for our agricultural producers. So, but I wanted to talk to you just a moment about a note or a message that we got from your regulatory work group.
Excuse me, Commissioner, could you speak up just a little bit louder into your mic, please?
Okay. I apologize. Let me see if
Thank you.
Okay. Is that any better? Okay. The regulatory work group came up with some suggestions. I'm not going to call them complaints, but how we can be better here in the department. Of course, we appreciate feedback from all those that we work with. But at this time, you know, as we work on our strategic plan, we feel like it's important to address concerns that the people bring before the group. And so, you know, we are a service organization here at the department, but we do have regulatory responsibilities, and those regulations that we're tasked with enforcing are, of course, are put in place by the legislature. We have to draft rules that lead us in the direction, or that help us to follow where the legislation wants us to go. So we don't create that regulation, but we are tasked with enforcing that. And the end result is the hope that we are providing a safe and abundant and a secure food supply. So an important step that that we want to take here in the department is to make regulatory processes more familiar to those people who want to, say, market a product. Say they want to market a meat product or something like that. And so we're looking at creating a regulatory pathway whereby if a citizen wants to create a product, to market a product, they can just go online to click on this regulatory pathway, which will lead them into the area where they would be regulated, and it will follow the steps that they will need to take to be able to meet those requirements. And so it would be an easier process. We also want to continue to work with our employees to make sure that they're responsive to the public and that they are trained and that they understand the role that they play and that they can direct requests from citizens to the proper employee that can address those concerns or that can answer those questions. So those are just some things I'd like to bring up and once again reiterate that we do welcome feedback. We want to hear feedback. We want to be a better organization, service organization, the best service organization that we can be. So thanks for the opportunity to kind of give that report. Appreciate it, Senator.
Thank you, Commissioner. We greatly appreciate that. And you're going to stick around with us for a while?
I will. We have
Great.
a
Wonderful.
meeting a little bit later this afternoon, but I'll be here for a while.
Great, thank you. And I want to officially excuse Representative Handy, my co-chair. Representative Handy is out of town this week and unable to attend. So we look forward to his participation in October at our next meeting, and we'll bring him up to date on everything else that's going on. I think what we're going to do next is let's move
Senator
the
Davis,
agenda.
we have a quorum now. Kelsey Hall joined us, so now we have 7.
Wonderful. Now that we have a quorum, let's take care of the other business of opening. Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes, to read the minutes? Is there a motion on the minutes?
I'll move we accept them.
Thank you, Jack. Jack Wilbur makes a motion to accept the minutes. Any changes or corrections that we need to make? I guess we aren't operating on legislative rules, so I need a second on this, on the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. The one thing is in the legislature, we don't use seconds. That's not part of our rules, but the rules here are we need a second. So
And then I
thank
can
you for
do a
that
roll
second.
call vote as well. So.
And a roll call vote. Callie, if you would, please.
All right. So Allison Einerson,
Yes, in favor.
Garrick Hall, Garrick, do you approve? Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Senator
Yes.
Davis,
Aye.
Jack Wilbur,
Yes. Aye.
Kelsey Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Butters,
Aye.
and Tamara Jorgensen.
Yes.
Okay, we're all good to go.
Thank you. All righty. I'm so excited about everything that's going on with this group and where you're at and what we've been doing. And want to go to our next item on the agenda. That's the co-packing presentation. Laura Gale and Dr. Allen Karen Allen from Utah State University. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Callie, am I able to present remotely?
Yep. So just at the bottom, there's the
Sure.
square with
Okay.
the arrow, and you're good to go.
Okay. Let me get this started then, and I will. So while I'm starting this presentation, let me just give you a little bit of context about what co-packing is. Okay, I'm having issues sharing, but I'll talk through this really quickly while there we go. Okay, I think I've got it. Can everyone see this co-packing slide now?
Yeah, it's just loading up, Karen.
Okay, perfect. So contract packaging or co-packaging is actually a way that we see a lot of our small companies or mid-sized companies transition into more of a commercialized level of food production. It can also be used by farms to handle some of their excess produce or things that were unsold. Typically, a contract packaging situation would be entered at a point when hand processing, even if it's in a commercial kitchen, say for example, the back of a restaurant in off hours, processing those foods by hand on a stovetop, even at a commercial scale, becomes difficult due to the amount of labor it takes, the intensity of how much time they have to spend just to get a little bit of product ready to send to market. So contract packagers are those food processors that are doing things with more automation at a much larger volume that these food producers can then contract with that manufacturer to produce their food product for them. So there are a lot of reasons that people might want to use a co-packer. They may not want to try to meet the regulatory requirements themselves. So they contract with a company who already has that in place. They may just not have the capacity. As I mentioned, sometimes these things become very labor intensive, and it takes a lot of money to try to install that processing equipment yourself. Also, there may be buyer concerns. If someone wants to go to a grocery store, they may require that it be done under a certain regulatory structure, which basically means those small companies have to go through a contract packager to meet that requirement. So I am the Food Quality and Entrepreneurship Specialist for USU Extension. I have worked with hundreds of small startup food companies over the last 12 or 13 years. And I've worked during this whole time very closely with the Utah Zone program as well. And the one thing we are regularly commiserating on is that when these small companies come to us and say, I need to find a co-packer, we have a hard time matching our small entrepreneurs and farmers up with companies who are able to provide these contract packaging services. And we hear anecdotally about, oh, I found a co-packer through this person that I met here, but we don't have a centralized database or list of people that we can regularly refer our entrepreneurs to try to help them through this process. So I am working with the Utah's own program to do just this quick study to get an idea of what the contract packaging capacity actually is in Utah. We will need, beyond this study, we will need to do something more in depth to really kind of suss out the need for specific types of products. But this is just an initial attempt to get a handle on who is doing contract packaging, providing those services in Utah, and what can we do to better understand their lead times, their capacities, some of those issues. Oh, okay, so I just talked about that bullet point, so I will skip this one. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to hand the time off to Laura Gale. She is working with me. She's also working with the Produce Safety Program. And so she's in touch with the farmers and kind of the food manufacturer side of this. I'm going to let her explain a little bit more about the survey that we set up and go over some of those preliminary results.
Thanks, Karen. So we created a survey to gather pretty detailed information from the existing co-packers in Utah, just to get a sense of their capacities, of the products that they're working with. And so we sent the survey out to a contact list from the Utah Manufactured Food Program and Utah Zone. We filtered the list to try and make sure that we were sending the survey just to people, to entities that are registered as a food manufacturing company. So we ended up sending it to 393 unique businesses. The survey has only been out for about a month. We sent it on August 2nd. So we've gotten 64 responses to date, and we're going to leave the survey open until September. So with it, we've been getting an average response of about 3 per day. So hopefully we'll continue to get responses. But 21 of those 64 self-identified as current or potential co-packers. And 15 of them were willing to give us contact information, which means that they are actually okay with being connected to people who are looking for co-packers. So that was good to see. So again, we asked them questions addressing the types of products they can process, what their conditions are for processing, and what their capacity is. So I'll just briefly go over a couple of data points that we've found just from the responses we've gotten so far. Some of them could. This is not each processor or each co-packer may be able to do multiple types of products. So what we did here is just showed the number that said each of these characteristics of products, if that makes sense. So of the 21 that responded, 18 can process room temperature, or they could store room temperature ingredients. This was important to understand because, we just, depending on the type of producer that's going to be working with the co-packer, they have different needs. And so these are the types of things that we wanted to find out about the facility. Anyway, so the majority of them are able to process or are able to store ingredients that need to be stored at room temperature, but we have limited capacity for refrigerated or frozen ingredients. And then as far as processing, they have to be certified then they need the equipment to be able to process at different temperatures. So the majority are able to process at room temperature, and we have limited capacity for hot temperature processing. And Karen will talk a little bit more about the implications of these limitations at the end.
And let me just quickly give you an example. The kinds of things that might be included in a room temperature process are baking mixes where you have dry ingredients or chocolate chips mixed into a bag that then is sealed. That would be an example of a room temperature process. Our hot processes are going to include those things, for example, any type of bottling, anything where even, for example, a barbecue sauce or a salsa where it needs to be heated up to a specific temperature to be safe for room temperature storage. So that, just to give you some context about what those differences are.
And then as far as product types go, as Karen just alluded to, we have several, I mean, the majority of them are able to do dry and wet processing. About half are only able to process dry ingredients, but there were no co-packers that only do wet ingredients, which I thought was interesting, and that's to do with these limitations of safety. And then 12 of them could process mix-ins, like chocolate chips or raisins or what have you. Thanks, Karen. And then packaging is another important characteristic, a constraint that potential food producers need to understand about their co-packers. So the vast majority are able to use flexible packaging. What's good here is that all of the varieties of packaging seem to be represented in our co-packing capacities. So that's good to know. There's limited capacity for glass and encapsulation, but flexible packaging is really important, obviously, and so it's good that we have a lot of capacity for that. The minimum run requirement can be a really important constraint for small producers because a lot of them, it's not even necessarily you know, that a lot of them are limited by their market. They don't want to be producing a whole lot and not sure if they're going to be able to sell it. They may not have the ability to store it. So this was an important factor. A lot of our existing co-packers require a pretty high capacity before they can even accept a company to do co-packing with. And then required lead time can be really important as well. Again, because a lot of these small producers don't have a very systematic relationship with their market, and so they may, you know, get an order all of a sudden and need co-packing facilities where they didn't before, and so this lead time is really important. And what's good is that it seems like the majority of them are actually able to accept a co-packer with pretty short notice. So. Do you want to take it away, Karen?
Sure. So
Okay.
let me give you an update on the current status. As Laura mentioned, we decided to leave this survey open through the end of September, send out some additional reminders just to see if we can't up that response rate. Again, it's something we don't want to leave it open indefinitely. There's that concept of the more you bug people, the less likely they are going to be to reply, but we do want to give another few weeks to collect some responses. At that point in time, we will provide a database of all the co-packers who said that they are willing. That will not be made publicly available, but Utah's Own then will be able to use that information to pair entrepreneurs or farmers or people who are looking for co-packing services with potential companies that can assist them. We will make this final report. We'll have the final report to Utah's Own by the end of September. Once we've gone through any editing or questions that come up from that, we will have a nice, we'll send it through USU marketing to get a nice final report. We'll have some one-pagers available as well. We are more than happy to send this out as PDFs, but also if you have a need for physically printed copies, whether it's the full report or some of those one-page handouts, we are more than happy to have those printed and get them to you so that you can distribute to anyone who's interested or that you might be talking to about this issue. So all of this data that we've shown is still preliminary, but there is one thing that is clearly standing out to me that I do want to bring up to this group at this point, and that is that there is a very apparent lack of capacity for acidified processing in our co-packing facilities. This is an issue because in the years I've been doing this, one of the biggest things is people want to have vegetables or salsa or pickles, something like that processed. And that is one of the most common types of food products that I get asked about in terms of helping someone find a co-packer. Other things that fall into this acidified category include things like barbecue sauce or so there's a huge gap in terms of just anecdotally the number of requests I receive. And I'm sure Tamara could jump in and say that, yeah, Utah's Own gets this same kind of question frequently. We only had 2 co-packers say that they can do bottling, and only one of them is certified to do acidified bottling. So I see that being a huge issue, because if we're looking for ways to help farmers use extra vegetables, some of that produce that they're not able to sell directly that they maybe want to divert into processing, having that acidified capacity would be a critical need. So we will need to go through, once we get the final results from this, we can go through and update those numbers. But I just don't see, with the number of people that say they can package dry mixes, I don't see a huge, over the next month that we're going to all of a sudden see a huge jump in the number of people saying that they're going to be able to do bottling. So that is something that would require a more in-depth study so that we could really look at the actual need in terms of the amount of processing, not just the number of businesses, but the amount of processing that those small businesses would bring to an acidified copacker, the issues with the kinds of ingredients that they can handle, how their product line is set up. Are they only able to bottle in plastic, or can they do glass, or vice versa? So those are some additional things that we would need to look at in more detail. And again, this is just a preliminary study, but it is the first time we've had any of this information actually compiled at the state level. So I did see in the chat that the question came up, do we know where these businesses are located? And I do want to just quickly address that. This study right now, we're not asking specifically for where they're located, but for the ones that agreed to be included in the database, we do have their address. So we would be able to put that information together just generally on a map to show kind of where the concentration of co-packing services are located within the state. So that's something that we can do for that final report so that everyone would have a better idea of how that is distributed from this preliminary data, at least, that we've gathered. So with that, I want to open up if anyone has any other questions about this topic.
Karen, Jack asked, Tamara agreed with you in the chat that there are only 2 companies she knows of right now doing processing, and Jack asked, how do we solve that issue? Is it a money issue?
So always with food processing, it's a money issue. It takes a lot of, I think, coordination to make sure that someone who's opening their facility up to do co-packing can stay busy throughout the year, that they're not flooded in the fall when there's extra produce people want to use, and then they have to shutter for the rest of the year. So it would take more of a coordinated effort to say who is going to be using that service, at what times of year, at what level, how much food can that facility process easily, and how do you make sure that there is some level of consistency maintained so that they can keep their lights on. And that, again, is a next step beyond this, because we know anecdotally there's a lot of requests for co-packing, but we don't know what the actual need and the timing of that need truly is across the state. So that would take a little more in-depth study. This whole question has to be broken down into some smaller pieces. And this was the first most obvious one that we could look at, because we just didn't even know how to put entrepreneurs and farmers together with co-packers.
Somebody asked, what types of products have to be acidified?
So salsa is the big one. I get questions about salsa on a regular basis. There are other things, sometimes even just canned tomatoes may need to be done under that acidified foods regulation. So the acidified food regulation is an FDA specific part of code. And there are specific requirements. Each food product would need to be evaluated separately by a process authority to determine if it qualifies as acidified, or if it can be made under a less rigorous level of regulation as an acid food. So for example, canned peaches would be an acid food because they naturally have a very low pH. As soon as you start mixing peaches and tomatoes and peppers and onions and spices to make a salsa, that then becomes an acidified food that is subject to a higher level of regulation and reporting and record keeping under FDA requirements. So that is where we would really need to pull out more of that information from some of these entrepreneurs and the farmers. Do they have extra raspberries that they want turned into jam? That's a much easier thing to do, and we may be able to find co-packers who can do bottling of that type. Do they want their raspberries incorporated into a salsa or a barbecue sauce or something that, as we evaluate that recipe and that process, we can make the determination that yes, that does fall under acidified requirements. That's where we need to do a much deeper study to find out what level of bottling processes some of these companies want to do. So, and I'm seeing some chatter about a food hub with a commercial kitchen. And yes, this could be something that a group could look at funding through the Specialty Crop Block Grant. That is one source that could potentially help address that deeper need. And in terms of final pH, there was a question about, is the acidified rule, is that just specifically based on the final pH? Final pH is a part of it, but it's not all of it. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds on those regulations, so.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if a person group were interested in doing co-packing, opening a kitchen, do they have to register? How would they go about that? And do we have that online? So if somebody's looking to be able to do that, and I guess the question is, with the FDA approvals and all of this, does this come under the banner of agriculture, or does it come under the banner of the health department?
So, multi-parts to that question. First, we don't have anything specific that would address how a business could do this to become a co-packer. I have been working, and other people through Extension have been working for years with our small companies and our mid-sized companies. And typically what we've ended up doing is helping them on a case-by-case basis. We are in the process of developing an online course that would help the entrepreneurs step through that process as a first step to get a food company started. Now, that being said, for a co-packing situation, you automatically move to a different level of regulatory oversight, because that is something that is going to be distributed more broadly through commerce than, for example, someone making salsa in a rented kitchen and selling it at the farmer's market. Now, when you're talking about getting into warehousing and distribution, there's a different level of regulatory compliance. And we have been working with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food very closely on a case-by-case basis for all of these people that we're trying to help move that direction. My biggest observation, I would say, in terms of co-packing, is that of all the people who have said, I want to start co-packing, I haven't seen a single one actually get to the point that they are, because they have this image of them working in the back kitchen at a restaurant or in a commercial kitchen, in a food hub or an incubator, and thinking they can do it all the same way they've been doing it, which is basically still by hand, just in a larger volume than you would do at home. And they quickly find out that that is not sustainable, and that it takes actual commercial processing equipment and much more automation, a higher level of kind of hands-off, press a button, watch the big commercial equipment actually do its work and do the bottling to really make it doable. But then you have the flip side to that. Is there enough capacity from people who need co-packing services to justify purchasing and running all of that equipment? Can you keep that process going year round? So there are a lot of approaches you could take to address this issue. And I think the first step is to more fully understand the actual need before a decision is made. Is this better in a commercial kitchen, in a food hub, or is this an actual processing facility?
Right. Other questions that we have? online questions? Sounds like to get into this business is going to be costly, and it's going to be many different levels of, if you will, licensure and approvals and everything else, not only from ag, but also from the health department, because your facility is probably going to be inspected by the health department in the local counties.
In this case, it would actually just be under the jurisdiction of the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. It would be under the manufactured food program.
Karen, can I ask a question? This is Lori.
Hi, Laurie. Yeah.
Because we're planning on putting in commercial processing equipment, then we would be able to, if we work with Department of Ag, we'd be able to co-pack.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we would probably want to talk to you, correct? And just kind of walk through the process with you as well, or we just work with regulatory?
I am always happy to be part of that conversation.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely pull your inspector in early.
Yeah.
Right. That we can get any of those issues out of the way. But I'm always happy to be involved in that, especially if it's a matter of the kind of processing that you're thinking about doing could potentially require evaluation by a process authority. If you have me there and the inspector there right up front, that just shortens that lead time all across the board. We can all be working together. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have met with Rick Beckstead and Jay as well already. Our team met with them and had them go over everything. So we've already done that, but I'll reach out to you then and we'll get that figured out.
Okay.
Thank you, Laurie.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions before we move the agenda?
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I will send the final copy of this to Callie once we're done with it, so she can distribute all those. But as I mentioned, if you would like me to send you printed copies, just reach out to me and I'll get those to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to talk about specialty crop block grants, and Callie's going to walk us through that. Callie, if you would, please.
Yeah, of course. So I just wanted to give you guys more information. I will give you the information that I have right now. Just know that we'll have more detailed information coming in the future. We look forward to having some training opportunities to try and help people get applications. So this year we had a special circumstance where USDA was able to get more funding for the specialty crop grant. So they set up a second grant, essentially. So it's still part of the specialty crop grant. It's still a specialty crop grant. It has a few flexibilities in it that the traditional specialty crop grant does not. So it's a really cool opportunity for us. It gives us, an extra bit of money, quite a bit of extra money, which is great. So I wanted to give some clarity to when we're going to announce more information, what we're looking for, what our priorities are going to be, and then how that fits in the timeline. So typically, the specialty crop grant will go live in January, and that will be the case for our next year's RFA. So if you're interested or know people who are interested in the basic specialty crop grant that we run every year, look for more information in January. This funding, we're calling it COVID funding, but it's connected to HR 133 that they passed, another COVID relief stimulus grant or bill. And so we're calling it COVID funding. So from here on out, I'll refer to it as COVID funding, although we are using the funding in a different way that we feel will benefit Utah producers better. So this funding is one time only. It's only going to happen this year. Obviously, I say that with my fingers crossed and knocking on wood, because you never know with USDA. They get money and send it down through us. So I don't want to say this is the only time, but for now, we're planning on it being only once. So if this is something you're interested in, now is the time to apply. It is also different from the specialty crop grant in that it's actually a 3.5-year project, a little bit closer to 4 years. So you have a little bit more time. And then there are some other, expectations, but this grant essentially allows us to open our pool of applicants and eligibility. So to give you what I've got, and I apologize, it's not incredibly detailed as we're still working out all of the details, but we plan to launch the RFA in October. on October 15th. That's our goal right now, pending any issues. We will be launching this application through a database. It's going to be a little bit different in the past. So it will be different. So if you've applied for grants in the past, just know that when we send the information out, it will be different. Read what we send out. So we're going to launch in mid-October. We're going to open it up for 2 months only. We want all applications by December 15th because we want to supercharge this. We want it quickly. We want to get funding as soon as possible. As you guys know, working with federal organization, there is a delay. So we are looking to have grants finalized and submitted to USDA by February so that we can hopefully get funding in time for the spring. In October, we will be launching our RFA. I'm going to give you the details now on what categories we're looking for and the applicants and the funding amounts and things like that. But just know it's going to have the traditional USDA application in a database this time. We're going to have a risk assessment. And we're also this year going to publish our ranking and rating system. Lori, the deadline is December 15th. So October 15th to December 15th. So we're going to publish this time our ranking and rating matrix. We hope that this gives applicants a better look into what we're looking for, also what USDA is looking for in these applications. As with our traditional specialty crop grant, we will do an in-state RFA. So we'll put out the RFA, we'll make decisions. But for this grant, ultimately USDA does make the final decisions, which is why there is a delay. Once we hear from USDA, you're good with your funding. So within this COVID funding, we've decided we will announce exactly how much money we have once we hear from USDA, but we're looking around $450,000, and we are planning to fund a maximum of 4 projects. We may only fund 1 or 2, but at a max we're funding 4, which is different from our typical funding. Usually we'll fund about 8. So the goal in having less projects awarded is that we could have larger amounts of funding for the project so that the project could do more. As many of you, I'm sure some of you have had a grant before. Sometimes it's difficult. Obviously, we try to spread the money around. So this time, with this flexibility, with this additional funding, we wanted to open that up for larger projects. So if you've ever thought of doing a larger project, this is definitely the time to apply. So we will award a maximum of 4 projects within one of the following categories. First category is innovative distribution for specialty crops. The second is innovative production. So basically training the new generation of specialty crop farmers. But think of that one as production, specifically production techniques for crops. The third is consumer recognition of specialty crops in the marketplace. And the fourth is GAP certification, vouchers, and other forms of training that are required for our specialty crop growers to enter into the retail market and expand their product and kind of the value-added sector. So again, if you're thinking of doing a project in distribution, production, consumer recognition in the marketplace, or GAP certification, this is going to be the best time to apply. The applicant eligibility is the same as normal with specialty crops. However, we have a little bit more flexibility with this grant on funding private organizations. So that's one of the things that makes this a little bit different and why we decided to do larger amounts of funding, because we can, to a certain extent, of course, there's always a limit, but to a certain extent, these projects can provide some benefit to a private organization. Again, not a ton, and it always has to go back to how is this supporting the industry as a whole. But in general, there's a little more flexibility. And in terms of how much can be asked, I did mention we were thinking about funding maybe 1 or 2 if that's how it worked out. However, in the initial request for your project, we are limiting that request to 50% of the total award amount. So like I said, you guys will know when the RFA comes out the exact amount, but let's say it's $450,000, you can request up to 50% of that full amount. If we get these applications and there's one project that just hits all the, requirements and kind of stands out and USDA is happy with it, you could potentially be awarded more. But in general, we would like those requests to not exceed that 50% of the award. So I'm just looking at my notes so I haven't missed anything. So just a quick recap. October 15th is the date you're going to want to look. We will obviously, of course, distribute this through email. We'll send it out to all of our channels. It'll be on our social media. We do plan on having probably a webinar to walk everyone through the application. We really want to include as many people as we can in this application. If your project can wait, if it doesn't need a larger pool of funding, if you don't fit in one of those categories, like I said, January will be here very soon, and you can apply for the typical specialty crop grant, where we'll have a little bit different categories. But if you guys fit into one of those, this will be the great time. And then, of course, with any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions now that you have. Of course, there's information that we're waiting on until we can communicate further with USDA. But for the specialty crop grant, I am your main contact. And I think most of you guys have my email, but I'll put it in the chat. Again, I'm happy to set up a quick phone call to talk about ideas. Basically, feel free, our door's open, call us anytime to learn a little bit more about our categories, because once your application is submitted, we can't make any changes to those applications. So we definitely encourage contacting us beforehand to clarify some of USDA's requirements and clarify our rating and ranking system. So that's pretty much it for me. Does anyone have any questions right now before we move on?
Anybody have any questions? I have one. What are the specialty crops we're looking at? I know what the categories of the funding would go to, but what are the specialty crops? Are we looking at what? Tomatoes or what?
So the funny thing is they have a list on their website. USDA has a list of specialty crops. However, it is not all inclusive. So we recommend, specialty crops. I believe, like, for example, corn is not a specialty crop unless it's a certain type of corn. So it's tough to just have a general no corn, because there are certain specialty types of corn that do apply. So for the most part, any fruit or veg, even nursery crops and things like that are specialty crop. Also, the second side of that is they do have value-added products, but the specialty crop ingredients have to be, I believe it's 50%, and I can clarify that if you reach out to me, but the value-added product, the ingredients have to be 50% at least specialty crop. So it's not just limited to commodities. Oh, thank you, Tamara. Honey qualifies. So it's not just limited to commodities. You can add those value-added products into it. If your product is not on USDA's list, then still contact me, because USDA, we can reach out to them and they'll either approve it or not. So
Wonderful.
thank you, Kelsey, for adding that link.
Thank you, Callie. Okay, let's moving on so that we have plenty of time for discussion today. We want to talk about the appropriation updates and some of the things that LFA has been able to secure the funding for, and give us an update on that. And I want to go first of all to the produce incentives and Natalie Lutz.
Thanks. So we've had a really busy summer so far with Double Up Food Bucks. I think the last time we met, we were just getting started, and Hannah Martin's done a great job of keeping track of all of our Double Up and SNAP that's been getting redeemed and distributed. So right now we are at $50,200 of Double Up that's been distributed to SNAP customers. And just for a reference point, last year, 2020, at this time we were at 19,100. And last year we ended up with a little bit over 100,000 in Double Up that was redeemed. So we're we're over double of what we were last year. So we're kind of really curious to see what that's going to look like at the end of the summer. This time is when a lot of the sales happen due to the abundance of produce. So we are really excited for what our end of season numbers are going to look like. Definitely going to be the biggest Double Up summer yet. And then we've just launched working on our evaluation, which includes some intercept interviews with SNAP customers at different farmers markets, and USU has been a great partner helping to do that. So we've included some more questions this year to get a little bit more robust data on kind of demographics of the customers that are using the program, and also how they heard about it. So we're looking forward to that, and that's something I can definitely share later this year.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
It looks like that's working very, very well.
Yeah, it's been a
and-
really great, crazy summer for Double Up. We thought last year was amazing and crazy, and this year's even more crazy. So,
But
in a good
we were
way.
hampered last summer with, of course, with the COVID and everything at our farmers markets, and they're more open this year. So it's really interesting to see that growth. I want to go to Linda Gilmore and bring us up to date on the Food Hub Startup Grant. Linda?
Yes, all right. I think I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay, and we'll look at the application again one more time. So the deadline for the local food startup and development fund is tomorrow night at 5 p.m. This has been very exciting. We received one application last week, and we have 2 more this week. Plus, we've had phone calls from different producer co-op groups and people that have heard about this Food Hub Startup Development Fund. And so where on the one hand, I wish we had a lot more funding. And Senator Davis, we so appreciate you making sure that this funding was available. But between the applications, the phone calls, and the numbers of people that have come to this website, I think we can demonstrate to the legislature and other people how important this a food hub concept is. Not just a concept, it needs to happen in to make our food supply chain work. And I'm so impressed with the private sector just jumping in and doing this. And so as we move forward, we'll wait to start reviewing these until after the deadline tomorrow night. But I just want to mention here, we will check for eligibility. So we've had a lot of interest, but we want to make sure people are eligible. And then we have published our rankings. So people who write the application or call, we just continue to have them look at this webpage so that they can double check to see what we will be using for ranking and rating. And just we're pleased with the demonstration of interest, Senator. And the other thing that's fun is just to see the potential for these food hubs in the food supply chain, and in particular, but not exclusive to the farm to school. So I'm excited to hear Kate give her update a little bit later, because all these things it's like they're there in the right time, the right people are involved, and I think we're going to make a big difference moving forward. So kudos to this group for pushing along some of these wonderful initiatives. Any questions?
Seeing none. Thank you, Linda, for that report. Next, I want to go to Kate Wheeler of the State Board of Education and bring us up to date on the farm to school legislation.
Great, thank you. Like Linda said, things are really coming together, which is exciting. It's going to be a short update because the short version is that we're still waiting for the bill to be drafted. But just to make sure everybody has the background there, we've really, as we've been working on our various farm to school initiatives, we really keep coming up against the wall that farm to school sits at the intersection of so many different things, of economic development, of agriculture, of public health, of education. And so there is really a need for statewide collaboration from those different sectors in order to be able to really push the movement forward at this point. And there's research showing that state positions, state farm to school staff can really be the leaders there and make that happen and help with program implementation and acceptance. So this bill that we are working on would formalize my FTE that I currently have at USBE to make sure that doesn't change or go away. And then it would add farm to school FTE at Department of Ag and Department of Health. So we know it's a big push because we're asking for money, and that's always always a big thing to ask for. But really excited, honestly. I think I've said before, but anytime we're talking about farm to school up at the Capitol right now, that's a win, and getting more people aware of the need. There's lots of people who want to do this work, but they do need to get paid to do it. So looking forward to asking for that. And then the other update I have is just a fun invitation for everyone. So October is going to be here very soon as National Farm to School Month. A lot of you know we do like to celebrate every October with an apple crunch in Utah. So that's just our goal with that, is to promote Utah agriculture, help people understand what we grow in this state, how it gets to the table. And so with the apple crunch, we try to get as many people as possible to crunch into a Utah apple. And this year that is on October 20th. So schools all across the state are going to be doing lots of fun events. There's some farmers, some farms that are hosting field trips as well. And then we are still planning. We had to cancel it last year, but you know, the past 2 years we've done it, and we're hoping we can make it come true this year to have an event at the Capitol. So right now we have about 200 kindergartners from Canyon School District that are planning to be at the Capitol for the Apple Crunch. We'll be in the Hall of Governors. They will be snacking on local apples. They will be learning about how apples grow. We have different learning stations for them. It's just a super fun time. So I will put all the details in the chat so everybody has them, but I would love to see all of you there. Come get an apple and chat with us about Farm to School. Just see these kids having the best time. It's one of those times when you actually get to see the event in action, and it's super fun that way. We're also going to be having like a cider pressing event at a school and a few other things as well. But schools all across the state will be holding their own things, and we put those out on our social media. And I know Kimberly and Kelsey are going to get in touch with me so that we can make sure that stuff is all promoted on the local food advisory council stuff too.
That's great. Sounds like really good. And schools are in session now, so, and live attendance this year, which really makes it a lot more effective, I think, for the Apple Crunch Day. So thank you for that update, Kate. Okay, moving on the agenda. The legislature set up a food security task force during the previous session, and they've been meeting and trying to find where that food security is and what we need to do as a state in making sure that children and families have the amount of food that they really need and are secure in that food. And with us this afternoon, Senator Luz Escamilla, who is the chair of that committee. And I want to welcome her. And Senator Escamilla, if you would, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Senator Davis. It's nice to see one of my colleagues sharing also one of the groups as well. Thank you to all of you and to the work you're doing in the local food advisory council. My name is Luz Escamilla. I'm state senator representing Senate District 1, which is the northwest quadrant of Salt Lake City, and a large portion of West Valley City. So you can imagine when COVID hit, my district was disproportionately impacted by COVID, but also by the many social determinants of health, of impacting quality of life of people, and poverty being obviously one of them. So the genesis of the task force, and I'll go into just the bill itself. So this was my bill, Senate Bill 141, and the task force has been in function, and I'll explain why it will end pretty soon here with our report that I think your group will also be very interested in. So the genesis of the bill was really to address the gaps. What happens when we get a pandemic and it hits obviously home? We realize that our emergency food pantries, which are great, and as you all are familiar with, we have a really good, robust emergency food pantry service with the Utah Food Bank. I mean, we happen to have this very large, old organization that's been serving in that capacity, and they serve across the 29 counties, whether it's through their own food pantries or, they disseminate and partner with other organizations. But when we talk about food security and hunger, from a more broader perspective, we're really talking about poverty and hunger and food insecurity being one of the kind of like the aftermath of something else, right? Is a symptom of a bigger problem. And what the task force was trying to do is bring state agencies, because what we were facing as we were facing a pandemic and we were having a public health crisis, we didn't know who in the state was in charge of addressing food security. And because of the uniqueness of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were asking people to isolate and quarantine in their homes with no food, right? So we were having families that were making decisions to step out of their homes and want to work because they couldn't afford housing and food for their loved ones, even though they were sick. I mean, these were decisions that were being made on a daily basis for many of the working poor families in our state. And we didn't have a point person in the state to address the issue. Yeah, we had, for example, Department of Workforce Services that oversee many of the programs that give some type of support for families. And then obviously the local counties were doing a lot of the work. And then federal money comes in to distribute for the response of the pandemic. And there was really a lack of collaboration and more than anything, just knowing what other people were doing. So the task force was created to bring state agencies and other key players. That was the mission of this task force. And I'll explain in a minute because there's a lot of obviously politics behind it. This was the last bill that passed in the session. So if you guys follow legislative session, they literally called the Senate until it came from the House with some changes that was made in the House. And I say that because not only is that nerve-wracking, and I know we have Senator Davis here, and I believe Representative Handy is part of your group as well. But when you're the last bill and they're just waiting for you, it could just be that they're not going to wait anymore and the bill is dead. But this bill was killed in the House and resuscitated and then came back. And the reason why is because we could not address food security. I mean, the pandemic showed just how bad it is when we saw more than a 300% increase of people saying that they didn't feel that they have food security at home and that they didn't know where their next meal will be during the pandemic. So we wanted to make sure that we had everyone at the table, everyone talking about what the issues are. So the committee was set up, the appointments came from the governor's office. The bill was very clear on who needed to participate. So it was created to establish, to answer certain questions with regards to the food security in the state of Utah. And they wanted certain recommendations coming by October 1st of this year to the legislature. So there will be a report with specific recommendations addressing economic security, public awareness, and understanding of what we have and how ending hunger is vital for a healthy community. Also increasing access to affordable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food, which I think you guys play a critical role in that piece. I mean, how do we make sure that people have access to local, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food for many of our communities, diverse communities, as we continue to increase in diversity, and maximize enrollment in SNAP, which we know is a very successful program. And the federal government, the Biden administration, of course, just made some changes. And I believe you guys were talking about some of those changes happening at the federal level and coming down the states as well. And of course, making sure more children, especially children and our seniors, have access to quality and nutritious food, but also healthcare, because it comes together. So the committee was appointed by the governor, and we had to work right away because we only have till October to bring this report. And then basically that's the end of the task force with this very specific, what's in statute is just to work till October, get a report in place, and submit those recommendations to the legislature. So it's not to be a continuation of a task force. This task force will end. And the goal was not to compete with any other groups, just bring the information together, recommendations, and move forward with policy. And there could be a recommendation at the end that says maybe you need to establish at a statewide level a task force or some sort of group. But from what I understand, the group is not moving in that direction. But just so you get an idea, the group was divided into 3 different subcommittees. One was outreach and community food resources. And what came out of that group, you're going to see a very specific request of more funding towards our emergency food assistance fund. We have a very small fund in the state of Utah, believe it or not, even during the pandemic. If it wasn't for the federal money coming in, we were at $500,000 a year. We're now, the group is strongly recommending 1.5 million. And again, this is only a draft. The final recommendation will not be public until October 1st, but these were the discussions and where the group is moving. And it's also they want to have an annual conference on food security. So all the players come in, and then the community also has a chance to get educated on what's out there for as resources. But more than anything, those service providers and agencies and different groups coming together and talking about what's available and what's what could be used also for this purpose of ending hunger and bringing more food security. The second subcommittee was the economic stability subcommittee, and really you cannot talk about food security and ending hunger if you don't talk about economic stability. So you're going to see more in this subcommittee. They're addressing benefit cliffs. Right now, many people are losing their benefits by just increasing $1, wage in their wages, and that is not sending the right message. I mean, we're putting people to the side between food and making an extra $1 an hour. So we're trying to, and that's obviously a federal issue. That's has to do a lot with SNAP programs, and those guidelines, as you all are aware, come from the federal government. So it also will have some recommendations that will be directed to our congressional delegation. Eliminate the state portion of sales tax on food. That is one of the recommendations for sure you're going to see. And then the last subcommittee is a policy and access to healthy food work group or subcommittee. And that subcommittee is addressing, keeping the current COVID era SNAP exemptions, which I know are in place for college students. And so those are the Universal School Meals Program Act, which I know you guys were just making reference to. And, there's a lot of participation of higher education institutions that they feel they've been left behind during this whole conversation. So there will be some components from them. But overall, that report will be public on October 1st. It's been an exciting group because it's very heavy on state agencies. There's a lot of conversation of how much they can put, they can recommend without getting the approval of the governor, which is obviously their boss. So to have a group with that has been an interesting process, but I feel those conversations have been very rich and will be reflected on that report that will be presented on October 1st. And from there, I think you're going to see, I already have one or two bills already open, files that we're just waiting for those recommendations to come with more details. But you'll probably see legislation and some of the fiscal requests coming from those recommendations as well. So that's an overall the purpose. We have people representing, the counties, the League of Cities and Towns, the League of Counties, local food, agriculture, all the state agencies, higher ed, the State Office of Education. So it's a pretty robust group of participants, and all of them, just the discussions have been excellent. So looking forward to bringing back the report and obviously sharing it with your group as well. And with that, Senator, I'm open for any questions. So I don't know if there's anything else you guys want me to address specifically.
Thank you. I have one question, and accepting any others. If you'd raise your hand if you have a question and let us know of any questions that you might have. But my question would be, are you addressing where we're finding food islands? Is that part of the overall scope? And I know that'd be a real deep dive to find where the food islands are.
No, so not specifically like that, Senator. We're seeing conversations coming from, for example, DWS has very specific data that has been shared in the conversations on just where, more SNAP, like SNAP or EITC, earned income tax returns are, and you're seeing just pockets of that, but not specifically related to just food islands. There was a conversation related to where you see very higher numbers of low-income working poor families not having access to fruits and vegetables or nutritious food. So that's, I think, what you're referring to with food islands. But it hasn't been that specific. It's mostly been more broader policies, but not in that area. Very few conversations have been in that area.
It's really a policy statement than like our group, which gets together and we really kind of, how do we do these things? And it'll be interesting to see your final report. Are there other questions? of Senator Escamilla? I'm not seeing any at all. So thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you, everyone. And again, more than happy to answer any questions, Senator Davis. And I think so. The co-chairs actually came elected from the group. I'm more there in that capacity as the senator and the sponsor of the bill, which has been great to see them working. And you know, I've been participating in all of that process and talking to them, but to see even those groups meeting at the Capitol, I mean, we wanted to also be very, and I'll end with this, very, I mean, how do I say this? There is a sense of an opportunity to increase the visibility of the need to have a statewide approach to this issue. And I know you guys are doing this in your capacity with your group, but really just putting it up to the level of the legislature and the executive branch, where when the response in the middle of a pandemic was, well, go to your emergency pantry, that was not addressing a comprehensive approach to the issue of hunger and food insecurity. So I really, part of why this happened was to bring that visibility, and it wasn't without controversy, which is sad to say that, right? I mean, when I said my bill died and resuscitated, I mean, you know, we use these terms, but really the bill did, you know, was voted down in the House, and we have to bring it back, which takes, you know, 2/3 of the House to vote for it to even come back and be reconsidered. But it was, you know, to me, it was a no-brainer that we have these conversations and we elevate the issue to that level. And so thank you for what you're doing. And when we report back, maybe there's something that your group can be interested in working, and you'll see the players. And I think that conference idea, which I've never thought of having a conference on this issue, I think it's interesting to see all of this group saying maybe we need to convene once a year and have conversations and have a conference and expose the best practices and good things that are happening, but also the gaps and those food islands that you're making reference to. So I just want to thank you for what you're doing. Representative Handy and Senator Davis immediately connected with me when I filed this bill initially, and they said, hey, you know, we have this other group that's doing this. So I hope you see, guys, that there's opportunities to complement work, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing us up to date on that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we want to go to our working groups or subcommittees, however you want to discuss it. I mean, this is where our really the rubber hits the road with this group. There are with our working groups and the ideas and things that they're coming up with. I think first of all, I want to start with is Bjorn here?
He is not.
Okay, Callie, if you would bring us up to date on the ag land preservation.
Yeah, so our last meeting was kind of scarcely attended. We kind of ebb and flow, where we'll have, you know, 3 people here and there, and then we'll have like 30 that jump on. So really for us, for ag land preservation, I don't really have any specific updates. We've been adding a few people to the groups. Just to reiterate what we're looking at, we're definitely looking at 2 tiers of that, which is really urban and rural. Commercial farms versus, you know, urban farms, and the size difference. You know, we have big commercial farms that may be hundreds of acres, and small city farms that are 1 acre, and they still have a huge impact on the community that they're in. So that's the approach that we're taking now. There's been a little bit of movement with our membership. So like I said, if you're interested, mainly our goal is really just to look at those 2 things and just figure out if there's anything that this council can do to push anything forward for ag land preservation. So that's really it for that, Senator Davis.
Thank you. And I know one of the issues has been brought up by a constituent of mine who's running an urban farm. I mean, it's been in the family business for a long time, but the size of it is now being questioned whether it's a green belt issue or not. And we need to protect that green belt on the small urban farmers as we urbanize more along the Wasatch Front. We need to figure a way to really protect that land. So I'm hoping your committee will take a look at that, and we can come up with some great ideas.
So we have addressed that legislatively, Senator, with the Urban Farming Act, where we extend those protections to small acreages.
The issue that's came up on that is the fact that you have to have animals. It's not about growing crops. And that was the issue that was brought up by a person with a few acres in South Salt Lake. And they've been doing that for a long, long time.
That's not correct. So it was done for crops, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. Last year we extended that to livestock production, but it is available to crop ground. I believe you have to have 2 acres to qualify.
Okay, I'll get that word back to them so they can go to the tax commit.
Yeah, I can get you the language on that if you like.
Great, thank you.
It's in statute.
I appreciate that update.
Yeah, you bet.
Let's look at the community food assessment. Natalie?
I don't think she's here, and I don't think they've had a lot of movement on that group. I think they've kind of just been testing the waters. Obviously, there's the food security task force and things like that. So I think they're just trying to kind of realign and figure out where they want to go with that group.
Thank you, Callie. Jack, are you ready with the innovations in production?
Yes. Thank you, Senator. I guess as a little bit of a matter of pride, as you said, this is where the rubber hits the road. The presentation you saw on co-packing today came from our committee, from the production work group.
I thought maybe it did.
And we're really happy to continue to support them as they move forward. If they're going to, look for funds for additional survey or study or whatever, we will continue to work with them. But yeah, we're quite proud of that. And that's actually was a big part of our focus in our last meeting. So the other thing that we've done is even though it's our social media, our Facebook page is a council-wide approach, and we're looking for posts from every work group and on all different types of subjects. It did also originate in the production work group. So Kelsey and I and Callie and Kelsey's intern meet monthly, and Kelsey produces updates every month. And I thought that since we had a couple of minutes and she's just finished a report, that it might be nice for Kelsey to give us a little bit of update as where we are with our social media, our Facebook page, and some things we may be wanting to look at doing a little differently or where we're going with it. So Kelsey, would you take the rest of our time?
Thank you. We created a page on January 4th, 2021. Since that time, we've grown to have a total of 172 followers and 137 likes. That may seem small, but our average reach on that Facebook page for our posts is 723, and that's within the last 28 days. And August has been much slower than our content from July and June. In July, we were getting over 1,000 people to see our content from the Local Food Advisory Council's Facebook page. We have posts usually 3 to 4 every week. We tend to skip Monday because we found that that's the least engaged day that our followers are going to the page, liking anything, reading anything, and just seeing that content. But some of our most popular pages are our profiles. We had over 2,300 people look at Tamara's profile of our council members. So when we reach out to you to do council items, that has been one of the biggest ways that we've been able to engage and share our stories. We are doing a lot more with production. We have features on different crops and livestock that we produce in our state. And not only do we provide information about how we might grow that, but we provide information on either a recipe for using the corn or the garlic scapes or the grapes, or where they can buy some of the food, but how they can find direct marketing farmers through either our farmers markets, farm stands, or farm stores. With that, we do a lot of distribution information. And we are getting sometimes 300 to 800 people to interact with those announcements, whether it's about local food hub, startup development funds, our National Farmers Market Week posts, our opening details. on other farm businesses in the state. Those have been really one of the most popular ways to engage with people. And then new this quarter has been information on legislative updates. We worked with UDAF's policymakers and were able to identify a few bills that we could profile on the page. And we were able to explain a little bit about the pollinator pilot program and the provisions for large concentrated animal feed operations, and just being able to share some of the regulations that are happening during the legislative season. And so we want to be able to continue doing that. We've also done more with food and agriculture related holidays. So if we see it's National Cherry Day or National Honey Month, we've been piggybacking off of that to be able to promote information. And we're going to continue to do that with my intern, Kimberly McCullen, through December. And then we are going to be hiring somebody new because she's graduating. And Kimberly will be spending the month of November training that new hire so that we have a smooth transition from Kimberly to a new student worker that will help promote our social media. And I encourage you, if you haven't checked out our Facebook page, to look in our chat where you can get a link to that page. We always love having content shared by you. And right now I am looking for content starting the second week of October. So that's how far out we are on loading content into our social media. But we would definitely love you to share more stories, photos, events, things that we can help publicize. Because if I know how it can fit into our schedule, I'll just add that content in.
And I just want to add too that I don't know if Kelsey, if you already mentioned it, but this has all been done without boosting any posts,
Yes.
without putting any money into it.
Organic, all the hard work of Kimberly and I spending every week we meet and probably spend an hour on social media marketing and techniques that we can grow our Facebook page with zero advertising funds. And I do feel like if we did some paid advertising, about $5 a post, that might help us boost our reach and improve the likelihood of our Facebook page appearing to our target audience members in our news feeds. And there's some great testing work I would love to do. I'm working with USU Extension to see if I can't do some of that as a learning opportunity for a student.
And just so you guys know, USU is volunteering the time for this. So they're just offering their intern. They're not getting compensated by the council.
Nope.
I wanted to just add one thing to just why we do report on social media. Information that we've gathered and to discussing with Senator Davis and Representative Handy, the overwhelming response when we were talking about the goal of this group was to share information and to spread what we're doing and to teach people about food production and food distribution. So that's why we put so much emphasis on this group. Kelsey and Jack, like they said, we meet every month and we are looking at some innovative ways where we can maybe move into a sphere where we can boost posts. So again, just thank you, USU, Kelsey and your intern for donating all of this time. It's a lot of time and we really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Jack, for that report. Innovation Distribution, Ruby Ward.
Hello. We met last month, and we've started looking at trying to bring some of the conversations that we don't have time to do during this meeting around the distribution and innovation that's going on in the state to the distribution work group, where we have a little bit more time to interact. And so we issued invitations to various groups that were doing something in the area of food hubs, and there were some conflicts with timing and stuff with that, but Brett Bayling from the Utah Farm Bureau Food Hub Project was able to meet with us and kind of talk about kind of where they're headed with things and what they're rolling out and stuff and some of their early successes. And I thought that was really interesting. And so going forward, Callie and I will kind of work to continue to put some of those types of presentations and conversations into that work group so that we can have, like I said, those longer conversations and have a little bit more time and space there.
Okay, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ruby. Let's see, Commissioner Butters has already given us an update on regulations. Thane Mickelson on the RRAP or RRAP. Is that a musical thing? What is that thing? Please.
It sounds like it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me today. I was at an earlier meeting today where we were talking about some training for looking at foodborne illness outbreaks and preparing for some training that we're doing on how to reach back and pull products when a product needs to come off of the shelf. So I apologize for being a little late.
It's okay.
I had an opportunity to serve on the food security task force that Senator Escamilla was discussing, and got to chair the economic and stability subgroup there. And it was a great experience and very eye-opening, and got to meet with some great people. An interesting part of that is the fact that that task force looks at the consumption side of food security from an individual standpoint. How can they be secure in their own lives? But there's a whole nother side of it that this RRAP is looking at. And RRAP stands for Regional Resiliency Assessment Planning Process. And I'm not sure I have it exactly right, but something along those lines. And we look at the food supply chain from production to the distribution side of things. And right now we're spending some time looking at the supply chain as it deals with dairy, beef, and grains specifically, and looking at the possible risks and gaps and vulnerabilities that can cause problems in that supply chain. And I want you to think for a minute about what you've seen lately on the shelves or in the car parking lots, in dealerships and things. You may have noticed that not all the shelves are full of supplies anymore. You may have noticed that the car lots are not full of cars anymore. That's all due to the supply chain issues that we're dealing with. And when it comes to food, we have to recognize the fact that we live in a global market. You know, our products from food come from all around the world. And that supply chain of how food moves and how food is processed and how it affects us here in Utah about access to food is a big issue. And so we are studying those things. And it's interesting, some of the facts we've already found about how different sectors like transportation or energy, temporary supply loss of power, and distribution, and even IT security can have such a great impact on our supply chain. Some large food production companies have been attacked from an IT security standpoint recently. And it just shows the vulnerabilities that exist. And when that happens, just how widespread it can be. Last year when COVID hit, we had trouble getting some of our meat processed. And that backs up clear to the farmer and moving those products through the line and to the consumer. And it doesn't just catch up in a day. Those products, they're at capacity every day that they run. And moving those products through are extremely important. And so when we lose personnel, or when we have trouble getting visa workers that help with farming, some of the visas access and those kind of things, all that are some of the things that we're finding that are gaps and vulnerabilities as we've been looking into this process. We've recently started drilling down to meet with not only the different producer groups, but also the large production facilities such as Dairy Farmers of America, or maybe JBS beef processors here in Hiram, and some of those that have national connections, and work on a national level with the milk supply or the beef supply. And how those products maybe start in Utah and maybe go somewhere else to be finished. The movement of food it's very, very complex. And so as we start studying this and looking at it, we start to look for things that action items that we can take to reduce those vulnerabilities and provide services that can look at maybe IT security issues that may be happening, or what happens if their power goes out. Can they do some things that can bring those kind of things back online quicker? So as we evaluate these things and develop a report, this kind of information could be very, very valuable, not just for these industries, but crossover to all food industries and how it affects us in Utah. You might be interested to know that they already nationally recognize the fact that we've got a challenge for local meat processing. And USDA has come out recently and said that they want to invest $500 million in increasing local processing of meats and looking at where we can find more security in those efforts. And so it hasn't been all decided how that money's going to be spent yet, but they are having listening sessions and those things are happening right now. And so these are extremely important factors to understand and to be involved with. And I've come to the conclusion that every aspect, whether you're a gardener, whether you're a small farmer, or whether you've got 10,000 acres, every acre is important. And every facet of food helps food security in our country. And you're providing a great service on the local food council by providing that local touch of how can we be more efficient on a local sense of helping that become sustainable, with recognizing the fact that we are in a global market. That's very important. I just wanted to share those things with you, let you know that we do have some preliminary deadlines of the end of the year that we're going to have some of these reports to the national lab that's going to do some analyzing. And hopefully by the end of 2022, we will have a comprehensive product out that shows some of these with some very specific recommendations for reducing our vulnerabilities and increasing our food security here in Utah through a better supply chain resiliency. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Thane. Thank you for that report. That opens a lot of things for discussion, I think, in my mind. And are there any questions of Thane? Thank you. Thank you for that report. And we take a look at these food islands, and we take a look at food security. We take a look at the supply chain interruption, that hopefully we're going to have that back and working well. But I want to open it up right now for general discussion. The most important part, I think, that when we start exchanging ideas. And so I'm just going to open it up and what's going on? Does anybody have any comments? I know what I'd like to do is get some synergy going so that when we meet at our last meeting in October, the one thing is we can come up with where we're going to go from here. What are some of the new ideas that we may need to take to the legislature to be able to fund or to be asked about? So I'm just going to open it up right now for general discussion. Anybody, please. Cimbria, you had something you wanted to comment on? If you'd unmute and go ahead, Cimbria.
Oh, is Linda still on?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, I
My
am.
question from the commissioner was, I know in our group meeting, are they talking about doing that as SUU? You had talked about extension doing that instead of the department. Has that decision been made where they'll house that?
I think we're going to go ahead and do something internally that would complement anything that USU does. So I haven't had a chance to talk to Karen. I did. Is Karen still on? I'll bet she's signed off.
I'm still here.
Okay. So, I think just to give you a little bit more understanding is we're just going to start with probably the regulatory processes that get used the most and probably are the most misunderstood, and do put together some kind of either a mapping or a video or both, so that people understand where to start and what to do next. Because if they can see the whole process, they're more likely to have a good experience and get through it more quickly. Or maybe they'll look at it and say, gosh, this is too much work. Maybe I don't want to do that just yet. Maybe I'll try something else that isn't quite as regulatory intensive. So there's all these entryways, these pathways into food production. But we just want to make it so that the producers, before they get into it. And so we're not at all, I think, interfering with what USU does. I would think this is complementary because we're just sticking with our process. Karen, any thoughts that you might have?
Yeah, I actually was just talking to Tamara about, potential resources that USU has already developed that we could house on a page or put a link from the UDAF page to make that process easier. So I think it's one of those things we will continue to work together, just like we have. Jay Schvanevelt has an incredible produce safety resource page for those growers, and we work directly with UDAF to help provide some of that information, and I see it would be really easy to do something similar. So USU will be here to support that resource to the extent that you would like our input.
Fantastic. Karen, thank you for that that offer. I'm pretty sure we'll take you up on it because we do need to work together. Anything we can do to make these pathways more understandable, because this is economic development for agriculture and for our state. And we're not intentionally making it difficult, but just because there are so many options, I think it's really easy for people to confuse programs because they're similar. And so I'm a very visual person, and if I can see that, and I'm hoping that for our producers, if they can see what that process is, and who to talk to, and then have that supplementary material like Karen is talking about, where you can go ask an expert from that university side. I'm excited to approach this project and appreciate the working group that kind of brought these things to our attention. And it's been fun to work with the various directors at the department. They're excited to work on this too. It's just how much can we get done and how fast, because everybody is excited about this piece of communication. It's just going to help our growers be more successful and our food producers.
Thank you. Jack, Kelsey, I'd like to throw a challenge to your work group on innovation. And what do we need to do to get, the innovation in production, these kitchens, if you will, up and running? Is there an investment we need to do? Do we need to use GOED, some of the monies that GOED has? Because this is economic development. I'd like to open it up for a little bit of discussion on that.
Well, I think it is economic development, and it would have as a financial piece to that, but I'm not sure that I'm the person that can speak completely to that. I think possibly Linda, maybe Karen, even Laurie Cerrone, all on the call probably could speak more to it than I could. So I'd love to hear what they have to say.
Kelsey, Laurie, Laura?
Well, I don't want to step on anybody else's toes because I'm definitely the new person in the room, but we've talked about next steps, including a more in-depth feasibility study, so that we can have that to design an action plan that's really well informed by the situation on the ground. So the first thing would be to better understand exactly what sort of processing requirements there are, like what small
producers are, what they're thinking about in terms of creating value-added products out of their, from the food that they're growing, and then other food entrepreneurs. There are a lot more ideas out there, I think, than we're fully aware of right now. And the way to capture that would be to commission a more in-depth survey. But Karen can speak more to that than I can.
And one comment related to that, Laura, is Tamara had mentioned in the chat that possibly the regular specialty crop block grant could be a source of funding for a more in-depth study, not the special one that Callie was talking about, but the regular one. And I believe you had mentioned it opens in January, and I think they make decisions in about May or so, and money would be available probably about this time of year or slightly later next year, maybe October, November. So that does put us at a bit of a delay in getting that started. And it does bring up one other issue that I wish Representative Handy were also here for, Senator, and that is that this council is scheduled to sunset at the end of next year. And so I don't know whether that isn't necessarily mean you couldn't keep moving forward with this project, even if it couldn't get funding to take the next step until November of next year. But if this council sunsets in November of next year, are there any plans to maybe try to continue it beyond that?
Representative Handy and I have had that discussion already, and we think this committee has been very, very helpful in moving forward and looking at local food issues and how to preserve our agricultural base in the state of Utah and preserve all of that. And so we are looking very strongly at asking for a reauthorization of this committee going forward. I think we've done a great job, and I think the discussions that we're having and that we have, especially with the agricultural community, for the legislature to have a discussion with that is very, very important. And I look forward to the committee continuing on into the future. So that will be part of our hope.
Can I say something?
Laurie, please.
So back when I was at Ag and moving into now working on the Food Hub, and also the fact that I'm a food producer, one of the things that I think that we don't address is that food producers, let's talk about farmers right now, because that's what is the ag part, but they don't have enough markets. There's not enough open markets for them to sell to. So even if they grow more, it means they have to go out of state to sell more.
Yeah.
So part of the problem and part of the function of the Food Hub is to try to become the single vendor for institutions, because the barrier for institutions in buying is that they do not have the time or the system to go out and talk to 100 different farmers to gather, apples. So the Food Hub then becomes that single vendor. Farmers can grow all day long, but unless they can sell what they grow, it's nothing. So when we talk about economic development, it's really about helping local food get more market share. We have to do that. And the only way we can do that is by cutting margins and by making local food more competitive.
And one of the ways is to open markets, I think, for ugly produce, if you will, not the Class A stuff. We need to make sure that all that is grown can get a market and get to market, and that makes it all successful. So much food, as we know, is wasted in this country, and I think people look at some of that and think it's done by the consumer, but really an awful lot of it is lost at the farm because there's no place to sell it.
And so the specs for distribution, broadline distribution, their specs are getting so difficult for farmers to meet. Everything has to be so perfect that they will go in with the load and come back with half of it because it didn't meet the specs. And when I talk about specs, I'm talking about if a cucumber is curved.
Mhm.
I mean, it's that ridiculous. So,
Yeah.
so again, having a place. This is the thing. When during COVID, when I was watching everything going on with the lack of a food system, we had food being wasted and people who were hungry. And yes, there's lots of groups in this group that are trying to help with that. But what I'm saying is the volume of food that was wasted and the volume of people that were hungry, there was no bridge to connect that. And so when you can have a place like a hub where food can come in, and you have several of those across the state, food can come in, and then you have the ability to become the aggregator and the distributor of that food. It cuts out so much of the barriers that there are between farmers and retail, or farmers and institutions. There's just so many barriers there, and no one wants to deal with it. So the food hub becomes that bridge.
And I had a great discussion with the Association of Counties, with the rural commissioner as well as a urban commissioner on these issues, and they brought up and both of them are growers, as a matter of fact, and getting it to market is always a difficult thing. So thank you, Lori.
And Senator,
Jack?
one more comment, if I may, related to what Laurie was saying. I think that, yes, having these food hubs throughout the state would be very helpful, but I know that in their case, they're looking at having processing be a part of it, and especially, for those quote unquote ugly fruits and vegetables. But last year, when the terrible windstorm came through in September, our teeny little farm lost 1,000 pounds of peaches and 2,000 pounds of apples on the ground.
Wow.
And when they hit the ground, you cannot sell them unless you are selling them to somebody who is processing them in a way that includes a kill step. And Karen Allen could give you all the details about a kill step, but basically it's bringing the heat up, the temperature, to a point where it kills the bacteria and whatever. And so I could give it to our neighbors and family if they wanted to process it and do something with it, but I couldn't sell that fruit. But you could, if you had a food hub with a processing kitchen available, or some other processing kitchen that you could use. And let's say I've never gone looking for a copacker. I don't do jams and jellies myself under our farm name. Being able to send that load to Laurie or somebody else would have at least gotten me some money for it, and would have gotten that food into the system, whereas it essentially went into my compost pile. And so I had a really big Bomber Good compost pile last fall because I had 3,000 pounds of fruit that wasn't usable.
So with your compost pile, and you put it back into the soil, did it work?
It helps. It definitely helps. I
Great.
had to go buy some straw because you have to have that carbon part as well. And so, yes, but it did help. It wasn't a complete loss. I didn't just throw it away, but yeah, that is just something that we need to think about as well. And not just for catastrophes, because fortunately, most of the folks in Perry and in Payson didn't have the big part of that storm. And there's only a handful of us at small scale that were in the big path of the storm, and some vegetable folks had some damage as well. But something like that, whether it just be your typical coal situation or seconds, things that don't meet the size and shape and specifications, or in a disaster like we had last September, that something like that would be really helpful, and it just doesn't exist right now.
That's one of the things I'm noticing on my tomatoes. I'm not a producer. I mean, except a backyard gardener. And the thing that I'm noticing with this drought and the heat that we had this summer has made an awful lot of tomatoes that just aren't. They're prettier at the grocery store. Let's put it that way. And my corn, the silking on my corn and everything else, didn't really fill the cobs the way the ears the way that they should have. And so, I mean, and I imagine I'm not the only person that's experienced that. I imagine the big growers have had that same experience, and we've got to be able to get that food to market. Notice, Ruby, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I was just, it's probably a little preliminary, but we've been looking into what you brought up, Jack. And so we're not ready to quite, say things, but we've got Laura working on some stuff that maybe it'll be ready by the October distribution work group meeting, that we can have a, presentation on that and kind of show you what we did. And we used some of the funds from a current specialty crop block grant that we were finishing up that we had to redirect because we couldn't do in person. Some of the plans that we had to do in person with farmers and food processors and things that we had to redirect. So stay tuned, but it's just kind of preliminary, but I think that these are really good conversations. And I really kind of think that you do need some of the food hub. You need some food hub type things can get at some of the stuff that Lori was talking about, in that you can have some economies of scale and some efficiencies. And so I think that that is true, but I think there's also going to potentially be, and this Karen's already kind of brought this up, is some of the on-farm processing, or a producer that's maybe, forming a co-op with, a handful of, small producers, or, just doing some things. I think there's going to be potentially some flexibility where we can do different types of things. And so it's not just dependent upon having food hubs, or just dependent upon having larger co-packers, or a really big company. But can we build some flexibility? And I think that goes back to what Thane was saying with, some of the meat processing, right? So recognizing that we need that local meat processing. And so I think that we're just starting to kind of examine what that looks like for not just with food hubs, but I think they're going to be a super important part of it. But some other options, what are kind of some of those limitations and some of those opportunities with increasing resiliency with local food processing at multiple different levels.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay.
I just posted a link right now to the New York City Grow that Senator Davis, that you've brought up about their system. But if you're interested, take a look at what they're doing right in New York City. And if they can do it, we can do it. But it's all about these little green markets that service smaller areas. So anyway, without going all into it, there's the link to check it out.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're scheduled to meet again in October. What I'd like to do is, and I believe that October meeting will take place before we do our report to the Agriculture Appropriations Committee. And so I'm hoping that we can generate some real excitement at our next meeting. I'm hoping that our agenda will give us more time to have this kind of a discussion and bring up new ideas and things. And our subcommittees will report back with some great new ideas and synergy that'll keep us going and moving. I want to thank everybody for attending today. I think we had some good reports, and I look forward to seeing you all. And maybe, just maybe, depending on what's going on, we may be able to meet live. Who knows? We'll try to figure that out. So anyway, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. Jack?
I will so move.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Callie.